and welcome to Conscious Pathways, the podcast where we explore the intersection of education and social justice through transformative conversations. I'm your host, Brittany, and as always, I am so happy and glad that you are joining me for yet another episode of Conscious Pathways. I want to thank everyone again just for listening and being a part of the Conscious Pathways community. As always, I do have the Conscious Pathways Patreon, so if you're interested in joining us for just $5 a month, you get to ask an expert. So you can ask me a question directly that I can answer on this podcast, or you can ask one of our wonderful and amazing guests a specific question, and they can answer it on the podcast as well. You'll also get access to my monthly newsletter, which really dictates a lot of what we've talked about on the podcast this month and gives you deeper resources, deeper dives, and also just access to just a wonderful community of conscious friends. So if you're interested, that'll be in the show notes to join that. But as always, just listening to this podcast supports me so much, and I always appreciate that. And on to my guest. This week I am joined by Dr. Javier Ayala. Dr. Ayala is the author of Lifespan Leadership. He serves as an academic leader, board president, and director on the Chamber Board. His book emphasizes that it's never too late to start leading, nor too early to begin. Dr. Ayala's book, Lifespan Leadership, is available on Barnes & Noble or Amazon. You can also follow Lifespan Leadership on LinkedIn or connect with Dr. Ayala directly. Lifespan Leadership features a weekly inspirational quote that encapsulates its core principles. It was such an honor to have Dr. Ayala join me on the podcast. We really talked a lot about lifespan leadership and what does that mean, really taking that developmental standpoint within leadership. And of course, you know me, I love theory, I love development, I love the inner workings of just how people learn and people grow. And that's really at the essence of this book. So we dived a lot into that. And so I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. So let's hop into it. Hello and welcome to Conscious Pathways. Today I am joined by Dr. Javier Ayala. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to have you here. Tell me a little bit about how you got started in education.
Well, definitely, it's one of those things that wasn't really apparent right away. I moved from, I came from El Salvador during the 70s and 80s when, if you're familiar with what was going on during that time, lots of civil conflict because of lots of the changes related to history and then different countries being involved in that country, more so than they should be. And so that led to a lot of individuals leaving the country, and I happened to be part of one of those families that left the country, and we settled in Southern California. And over time, you become part of the culture, and education has always been something that's been shared in my family as valuable. All my family has, once they came to the United States, they've definitely pursued that, taken advantage of that. And so I always saw myself as pursuing education, not sure what it would look like and what it would be. And so my first year pursuing my bachelor's degree, I had an opportunity to do a internship. It was an internship from our wording now, but it was more of a experience that was part of a class that I was taking. And in that class, we had an opportunity to volunteer and participate with a variety of organizations. I think it was probably like 100 options. And this is in Oregon. So I participated with one in particular that worked with migrant workers. And so not knowing too much, knowing about the role that they play in terms of providing food for us, etc., all those things, but not really understanding much beyond that. I had a chance to visit a couple sites in Salem, and this is in Oregon, and then really had my eyes open to the lack of opportunities that many individuals who work out in the field that they experience on a daily basis. And along with labor laws and all those things that come into play in producing or not supporting those opportunities, it became very clear to me that they also did not have access to education because of cost, because of just and not being part of their experience. And to me, that was a very concrete realization. And then
Mm,
from there, I realized how um, I always felt uh, that, I won the luck of the draw, so to speak, because many individuals who came from El Salvador did not stay or weren't able to stay. So I felt
mm,
very blessed. But then I realized that, well, my blessings are really more than that. It's just the opportunity to be able to pursue education, to have that transform the way you see things. And in talking to families that were working out in the field, I
mm,
realized that many of them wanted to do what I wanted to do, but in many cases, they just did not have that opportunity. So it really struck a chord with me in my heart, in my mind, not knowing
mm,
that pivotal event would lead me to pursue uh, education, not only for the purpose of educating myself, but for
mm,
looking at education as a transformational means to change things. So so that was my spark. Um, the formal, which really catapulted me into looking at it more closely, was a class that I took around liberation theology. And
mm.
I don't know how familiar you are with that. There's works of Paulo Freire. There's a whole bunch of
Yep.
different educators from the Americas that talk
Mm-hmm.
about how important education is. And
Yes.
that really helped me understand how much education really shapes how we see things, how we perceive things, how we problem solve in many ways. And
Mm,
so I made that connection. That's where I devoted and committed myself to being an educator from that point on, not
mm-hmm.
knowing exactly where it would land me, but or what it would look like today. But I knew that pursuing education was really my passion. So that's where I got my
Mm.
start.
Yes. I love that experience with working with migrant workers and really understanding their experience, understanding their lived experience and the, lack of opportunities that are often granted to these people who really are the backbone of, our society here in the United States, and how little opportunities they are given and how little, just appreciation and all of these great things that they offer. And so I love that that was a part of your background and experience. And also, just that liberatory education, thinking about Paulo Freire and all of those really great thinkers that are kind of outside of our traditional scope, right? So in education, we learn about a lot of the theorists in education, and they're usually older white men. So it's we have so many other thoughts out there. And Paulo Freire is just such a like he was just on the top of my list of just educators out there, just the way that he thinks about things and his approach to education and how liberatory it is so absolutely beautiful.
It was, and the timing was pretty interesting because I
Mm,
saw the situation. It wasn't even part of the liberation theology course. It was a different course.
mm-hmm,
But then once I saw that experience, it was a very contrasted experience.
mm-hmm,
There's people who are part of mainstream, people who are not. And
mm-hmm,
so it's very concrete, very real. It's not something that's intellectualized, but it's real. And then having a subsequent course that really brought the theory into it
mm-hmm,
was was what really gelled to me. Even
yeah,
though, ironically, the language that Paulo Freire in many of his books talks about is very hard to penetrate. For
yeah.
some for some reason, it really made sense to me. Ironically, right away. So I'm
I
not
think it kind
sure.
of makes sense
Yeah,
because I know originally when I read like the pedagogy of the oppressed, right? Because there's different versions of it, and so there's some versions that are translated into English, and I think the translation gets funky for some people to read because I've heard people have a hard time getting into the language, into the books, and I kind of had a hard time at first getting into the books, but then I read a different version. And I was like, okay, I'm attaching to this version. I'm understanding this a little bit deeper, but I think the translation, I think some things kind of translated oddly, and it makes it really like if your only language is English, I think it makes it a little bit difficult
right,
to attach to it. I don't know if that
right.
makes sense.
No, I think you're right. And I
Mhm.
think that's because many. many movements, many
Mm-hmm.
perspectives have derived from that language.
Yes.
That language is not as common as it would be in the 70s or 80s,
Mm-hmm.
even up to the 90s, but it's really the bedrock for lots of the conversations we have right now.
Yes.
And obviously, it's more complicated, but at the same time, it's got some fundamental premises there that
Mm-hmm.
are invaluable and can really help you understand things. To
Yes.
me, one thing that I found really in particular that really has shaped my thinking a lot is around banking education.
Yes.
So the banking system. So if you recall, and it's almost simplified, but
Mm-hmm.
the teacher teaches and the student learns, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
the student and the teacher learn together.
Yep.
So that kind of the banking conversation, or that really, yeah, really reminded me and really just kind of gave a perspective in terms of my own education, how I wanted it to not be a banking education type.
Yes.
And that's where, I got more involved post that visit with different activities,
Mm-hmm.
I would say more grassroots types of organizations that I
Yes.
participated with. So that I felt that can somehow contribute to a better situation for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But banking, and I approach not only education from the perspective of a non-banking type of approach to education, but also leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So part of most recently, I released a book, and it's really a type of book that really encompasses a non-banking approach to leadership
Mm-hmm.
development across the lifespan. So typically, we would see leadership at certain levels of the lifespan, adult, or certain qualifications that people might have
Mm-hmm.
around leadership, and it will often be conflated with a position as opposed to leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So, and therefore the leader speaks and the followers listen and follow, and
Yeah.
that to me is really banking by other means. So I
Mm-hmm.
really there's a time or place for some of it.
Yeah.
Person yells fire, or pulls their child close to them as they're crossing the street. You can't
Yeah.
really have a discussion around that. Just pull your child, so
Mm-hmm.
they're safe. But there's also I think with more liberation types of education, I think we're in a better position to really make a big difference in our own personal lives, in the lives of others, um,
Mm-hmm.
and really make a big difference. And that's what I've committed myself to on a daily basis and professionally. So since then.
Yes, yes. And speaking of your book, I do love that it goes into like lifespan, right? Just teaching across the lifespan and leadership across the lifespan because it does kind of differ who you're interacting with and how you're interacting with people. And especially connecting with that, we have those very traditional models of education and we have that banking model of education, and how it really does go hand in hand with different leadership styles. And I know for me, I love the transformative leadership style where you're really,
Mhm.
again, it's kind of very similar where it's not, I am the leader, I am the all being, all seeing, all knowing
Right.
entity in the room. Whatever I say goes, and you don't need to question that. Where it's like, especially in education, when you look at that banking model, it's, well, we want people to be an active participant in their education and in their journey. And we want people to, you know, have a say in how their educational journey goes and to really be able to think critically and think reflectively. I think that really connects deeply into, as an educator and as a leader, what
Mhm.
is your intention at the end of the day? So whenever I'm in the classroom, my intention isn't to have students who blindly obey me.
Right.
I don't want that. I don't think that helps our society. I don't think that helps our students to learn. I don't think that helps us grow as people. I
Mhm.
want them to critically think. I want them to ask questions. I want them to be able to feel safe to talk about things, to explore different topics, to be wrong sometimes, right?
Right.
Like I'm not expecting students to be perfect. I'm expecting them to learn. And the same thing when we're going with leadership in whatever capacity that looks like. Again, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting people to learn. I'm expecting people to try. I'm expecting us to grow together. And I think understanding. I think whenever I have seen, myself in leadership positions. Oddly enough, my background and understanding in child development is
Right.
like the bedrock to me being a good leader, because I understand child development, I understand human development, I understand across the lifespan, so if I'm working
Right.
with, 14, 15-year olds, I have a developmental understanding on what's going on with you in a
Exactly.
general sense, right? Each individual is going to be different, but I understand in a general sense, right? Puberty is happening, hormones are happening, right? Your brain is developing. What parts of your brain is still developing? What parts of your behavior are you still working on?
Hmm.
Um, and so having an understanding of that, it changes the way that I approach that population. It changes the way that I approach that individual. And so it's just a really strong thing. So I love that lifespan is a part of that. Um, what made you
Absolutely.
want to really combine those two things
Yeah.
together?
Well, definitely, so many times. So in my book, but the story starts off with me being at a board meeting
Mhm,
as a board president for a school district, and then having a presentation. So part of in that capacity, when you have presentations that are done by the schools, by different
mhm,
community members, talking about a variety of topics, and this one in particular was from our one of our schools that is known for its leadership curriculum.
mhm,
And so I, as I listened to them and heard them talk, the young students, elementary school age, and I
mhm,
was thinking, wow, they're really phenomenal. They're really impressive individuals.
mhm,
And they felt very comfortable. You can tell they had been nurtured at their school by their principal. Their families have been really supportive of them, um, in terms of being able to put themselves out there in a good way.
mhm,
And here they are presenting to grown adults and really, leading us and talking about how what they do in terms of leadership has an
mhm,
impact and what they did to make a difference. And I was, okay, we are, I feel like, our adult filter lens
mhm,
is really preventing more leadership from happening.
mhm,
And so that became kind of one of the basis, one of the premises for really kind of looking more deeply at
mhm,
the development of leaders. And then, upon reflecting on this, I also thought, okay, wait. So I've taken lots of leadership courses, but I've taken lots of leadership courses. Like I'm
mhm,
a adult, but what happened to the leadership experiences that might have had, way back then? I
mhm,
couldn't really think of too much, but had, what would have happened if that experience would have been more concerted,
mhm,
intentional, implemented by the schools early on, elementary, middle school, high school, incorporated in the college curriculum? Well, what would that look like? We often talk about intentional, targeted interventions to make a
mhm,
difference. So, and I couldn't, and I thought, like, what would happen? What would happen if leadership was incorporated throughout the lifespan?
mhm,
And then I also taught a class on human development for a couple years now, depending on the situation. And it's really looking at all the lifespan in terms of the leadership, not leadership, but human development, the biological, the social, the psychological, from what eventually leads to birth, in terms of the
mhm,
situations, to early childhood, middle childhood, adolescence,
mhm,
emerging adulthood, to adulthood, to late adulthood. And so I thought, okay, wow, this is kind of a unique situation. Like, I actually feel very confident with both
mhm.
pillars, and I felt like, why not just write a book? And
Yes.
so, and I wrestled with writing a book how many of times, but this time I felt like, okay, this is stuff that I can do in my sleep. Let's put it on paper.
Mhm,
And that's when I committed to really writing the book, because I felt like I wouldn't need to refer to a lot of things. I would just get it done,
mm,
right? Because
yes.
this is something that's part of my DNA, that I've taught this course and know the literature inside and out. I've
Mhm,
taken, leadership curriculum, but also really I like to manifest what I've learned in the community as
yeah.
a board member, and as an academic leader, um, as a board of directors, as a parent leader. So all those things that
Mm-hmm.
I felt I wanted to put down and also share my perspectives on it because I think I saw a major gap, a
Mm.
significant gap. You know, many times you think of Google leadership program, you'll come across it associated with the MBA.
Yeah.
Um, and so, in turn, I realize it's a function of search engine, search engine function, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it just shows where the clusters are, and sadly,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes another filter that limits who can actually step up into these roles because we need leaders. We need leaders badly. We have lots of
Yes.
positions. We have lots of positions that need to be filled, but we need
Mm-hmm.
leaders. So, so
Yes.
that's what led to plus the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic.
Mm.
So I
Yes.
had organized because I wrote the book primarily during the pandemic toward
Mm-hmm.
the tail end, and so it allowed that kind of freedom to be able to be creative around a
Mm-hmm.
personal project that incorporated and integrated both my personal life, my professional life, and my
Mm.
aspirational life, right?
Yeah.
And that's that product. Yeah.
That is truly amazing. While the rest of us were learning how to make sourdough, you were just writing a whole book during the pandemic. Actually, I
Well,
think my pandemic.
yeah, it's funny because one thing that really did help, and I'll share with your
Mm,
listeners too, is really being able to not self-censor.
mm,
That to me, and somehow, okay, I think it was a book by yes, the self-censorship because that's an
huh.
enemy of doing anything, I think,
Ooh,
and
yes.
and I've always felt that, but I didn't quite know what words to put with it until
Mm.
I read a book by Brene Brown, Daring Greatly.
Oh, it's a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you don't need to agree with everything, but you need to agree with
Mm-hmm.
something that's transformative. That's really your thing, right? And I
Yes.
felt like the whole thing about just limiting yourself, like life is short, self censorship. Just step in there, see
Mm-hmm.
what happens. And if it doesn't work out, then you learn something. Then try,
Yes.
try. So
Try
I
it
think
again.
that really allowed me to just have those pages flow
Mm.
and just accumulate, um, because otherwise I would have been in a situation where the call to perfection,
Yeah.
the call to really call to perfection is another type of self censorship, right? Because you
Mm.
want certain things to be perfect, and therefore until they're perfect, you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to release them. So, and it's
Yeah.
also there's a vulnerability too.
Mm-hmm.
Putting something that's public on paper or a podcast, uh,
Mm-hmm.
you put yourself there, evaluating your intentions, which is to be transformative, to make things better for others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if that's really part of what you want and what you're trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to use that to overcome any sense of vulnerability. It's still there. We're all human, but I think you need that kind of a pivot or kind of a anchor to be able to transcend
Mm.
some of these non-tangible barriers that keep us from accomplishing our potential.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I feel like you just spoke to my soul there. The
And I'll
self
take that as a
censorship.
compliment.
Yes, yes. It's definitely something as an entrepreneur and just someone who is growing a business and doing all types of things out here in the world. It's definitely difficult, and just kind of reconnecting with that creative process and just allowing yourself to create freely and not censor yourself and not try to make it perfect. I think that was during my pandemic hobby was I got into watercolor painting. Um
Nice.
and that was really fun. It was relaxing. You can watch a little like YouTube video, like kind of like, okay, I'm doing a sunrise now. It was relaxing. It was really great. But I think some really beautiful learnings I took from that is like I can't have perfectionism and be trying to do watercolor because it's watercolor. It's water. It's gonna do what it wants to do sometimes.
I'd love to see some of your work at some point. So it sounds amazing.
I just have five disambiguous sunsets. So I don't know if there's
Hey,
much to
five
say.
five is better than zero,
You
so
know what? Yes, 5 is better
yes.
than 0. I'm feeling
So
inspired now. Maybe I'll do some
yeah,
watercolor painting.
let's have a
Maybe I'll
little
get back into
showing
that.
for you at some point. Yeah.
Yes, it's like
Yeah,
these
I
are all
think
my
that's
sunsets.
yeah, and I think that's ultimately like the message for the book, just is
Mm,
really, you're gonna miss every shot you don't take. I haven't said
absolutely.
that, but I think, that's the gist is there's a lot of individuals that that might look at you in a certain way, might hold you back
Hmm.
from trying things, but you might inspire them actually
Yes.
because they might say, "Wow, this person of which you know don't see doing X, Y, Z, whatever that may be, but they still do it."
Hmm.
There's admiration, this inspiration there, even for people that
Yes.
might not be on your side. Over time, you might help them,
Hmm.
right? You might inspire them, and that's what this book is about. Is really, people will take what they want in terms of the bottom line. There isn't a book like it that really
Mm,
embraces leadership development across the lifespan.
yes. Yes.
So I would say that in terms of coining a new term,
Hmm.
that would be something that I'm very proud of, even if it is just only that lifespan leadership.
Yes.
So to really,
And
it should lead to other conversations. People should engage with it, probably, critically evaluate it,
mhm,
come up with their own model perspective, and that I would welcome 1,000%. That's what I would like to happen
mm,
because that book does not have the answers. But if you all are all of a sudden thinking about engaging your elders,
mm,
which we don't
yes.
do
Not at
as
all.
much
Not at
in
all.
the United States, but other countries, and you're trying to think, okay, how do I engage my elder in a way that allows them to contribute in a way
Hmm.
that you know really makes the world better, right? That's a
Yes.
different question. Just even
Yes.
asking that question, or how do I see my 1 or 2 year old in a way that maybe creates opportunities for them to try new things,
Mm,
as opposed to restricting or limiting their abilities to do certain things, right?
yes.
So that's if that is a question that comes up, then that book is very successful. If you
Yes.
yourself are thinking, like, geez, well, I hadn't thought that I actually have a chance still. Or like you're telling me that I can be a leader currently? Yes, you sure can.
Hmm.
If it leads to that question and that opportunity for you, then that has done its job.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And it doesn't even matter whether you attribute it to the book, but the fact that you've gone there,
Hmm.
that is revolutionary in terms of
It is.
being able to shift. Because we all know all it takes is one idea,
Hmm.
to get somebody on a path. Think about my experience with the migrant workers.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've had your own personal experience as well. So, and being reflective enough to really think about it in a way that shares it with others so others can connect and see that
Hmm.
possibility in themselves. That's really what lifespan leadership is about.
Yes, I connect with so much of what you just said. Just looking about how we look at leadership, what kind of questions are we asking, and how are we connecting with other people so that they can see, all of the leadership abilities that lies within us, right? Like it's in outside of all of us. It's just how are we awakening that, and how are we allowing that side of ourselves to really truly shine.
Mhm.
um, and in terms of this idea of lifestyle or you know lifespan leadership, how do you see this helping and supporting kind of historically underserved communities?
Yes, so I think what it does is really um, remind our communities of their agency,
Mm,
because so much in society says that you cannot and you can't do this, or you're not
yeah.
able to do this, or here's the rules for doing XYZ, or you're limited in this way.
Hmm.
The book gives you agency,
Mm,
and you don't need a title to be an agent for yourself and your community. What you
yes.
need is, a vision and then what to do around that vision. Uh, that's becomes your mission on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
and that is very democratic.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't require somebody to tell you you can do that. And so
Yes.
from that, you have common shared interests that our communities can come together on and problem solve,
Mm-hmm.
and then build each other up and support each other around some of these leadership components, right? So um, I think being able to engage with different ideas as you build and look at it from the lifespan perspective is super critical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in our communities, I'm trying to think, for example, uh, oh, I can think of an example most recently because in Al Cajon,
Mm-hmm.
there's a large Middle Eastern population of individuals. So I'll just share an example most recently from I had a meeting with a couple individuals last week, and the whole idea of who can really drive an idea, or it was around a business venture. I can tell that it has shifted somewhat, not
Mm-hmm.
because of my book, but just by talking to that group over time. That some of the ideas don't have to come directly from the traditional model of thinking, right?
Yeah.
An elder, we want to respect our elders, and
Yes.
corporate, but again, ideas of leadership are promulgated across the lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, we had an individual who had an idea about entrepreneurship venture,
Mm-hmm.
and it so happens that they're able to be very phenomenal in terms of coming up with that plan and idea and get other
Mm-hmm.
individuals to support it. And so they're moving forward on the business idea, but it didn't come directly from the patriarch in that case.
Mm-hmm.
It came directly from individuals in their 20s that are very energetic and passionate about what opportunities exist here. And so, in talking to them and knowing them for several years now, I was very happy to see a shared understanding between the different age groups,
Mm-hmm.
and then having them hopefully kick off a new restaurant that's coming up here soon in Alcohol. So
Yay.
so that's one idea. The other one is
Mm-hmm.
really around also developing others,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
because it's we there's one, work on yourself before you can work on others. I think there's some truth to that, but at the same time, it's not one or the other, right? That's very
Mm-hmm.
binary. Either I work on myself or I work. It's we work on each
Yeah.
other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that the book allows us to work on each other in the very and it's the unique part about this is that I share very clearly my value structure in the book, and it's a pro-social value structure. So pro-social being contributing to elevating people's conditions,
Mm-hmm.
supporting people's aspirations and goals along with yours. It's not I've come, arrived, and I've conquered kind of model of
Yeah.
leadership. It's like let's do this together. Let's be pro-social, which we learn
Mm-hmm.
in the playground. Many of us do.
Yep.
And so really that's where the lifespan leadership model is going. It's really creating more pro-social leaders that can over
Mm-hmm.
time, you know, um, fill those positions that will become vacant as the next generation retires and moves on. Because we want, that's going to happen
Yep.
regardless. Who do we want that to be,
Yes.
right? So this
Yes.
this book answers that. It provides it. We want a certain pro-social type of leadership approach to things across the
Yes.
lifespan, right?
And I think it's so important when we're looking at, the generations that are coming up today. Like I'm personally a millennial, and so it's really exciting to see, Gen Z coming up and how energized they are, and they know a lot. They have a lot of information, and they're wanting to be more actively engaged, right? And so it's so hopeful to see that. And so looking at ways, like you're saying, how we can harness all these great ideas, all this great energy, all this, like, this learning that they're doing kind of outside of the traditional education system, right? They're doing a lot of learning outside of that.
Right.
And they're coming incredibly aware of society and the world. And it's so exciting to see that. And so, how then are we in leadership really harnessing that energy and providing them to support for them to, utilize that in, like you're saying, this very pro social way? And so, it's when I'm thinking about the future and I'm kind of thinking about the future of education and I'm seeing the generations that are coming up now, Gen Z is fiery and I love that. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
I think Gen Z gets a lot of fire, but I think that they're on the right track.
Yeah. Well, part of it is because they're very aware of the clock, right?
Yes.
I think there's like you said, there's so much information out there, good information, not so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to ignore,
Yes.
right? It's, even if you turn your unit off, your smartphone, you're still going to hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to ignore what's going on in the world. And I think, in particular, that generation feels like, okay, there's a clock and we got to do something to
Mm-hmm.
make a difference, right?
Yes.
So, and so that's good. I think that kind of agency is really good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think as the other age cohorts kind of look at that, we need to, again, look at lifespan leadership and allow
Mm-hmm.
or create those situations so they can feed into it
Yes.
more directly, right? Because again, we really can't just rely on one group or one person or one type to really solve our problems
Yeah.
or create the future, right? We can't
Yeah.
just ship ourselves to Mars, and that's all good. It requires all of us, to be able to
Yes.
be creative and productive in that way. Um, and that doesn't mean that that's not valuable to, but it's still the potential.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that everybody learned, and this is an example, learned calculus. Let's say there was no limits to learning.
Mm-hmm.
There was no limits to leading. Wouldn't that be a great situation, right? Wouldn't
Yes.
that be phenomenal, right? So, part of lifespan leadership is to chip away at those things that prevent limitations based on age, based on experience, based on just the whole prototype of leadership.
Yes.
And so chipping away at that. Um, so yes, I think we need fiery people. We need energy, right? And we need to also share, the basics, right? So being able
Mm-hmm.
to, I'm just switching gears, understanding the basics of physics, right, will help you become a creative person,
Hmm.
right? Because you still need to know about gravity, right?
Okay. Okay.
You can't do, you can't just say, oh, it was created by somebody, right? It's those parameters are really important. Parameters leadership. You need followers.
Mm-hmm.
You need a leader. You need a vision. You need you need to be able to communicate with individuals. You need to be able to resource them out in a way so they can be. There's the how is really let up to your individual personality, uh,
Yeah.
taste or approach to life. But you got to be able to grapple with those fundamentals, right? So you can
Yes.
actually create something. You know, um, so that's kind of giving those foundational principles, so people can say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if I'm going to be a leader, I probably should know how to communicate with myself and others, and know how
Yes.
to bring them along, right? If I'm going to be a
Yes.
leader across the lifespan, I might want to change my vision depending on who I'm talking to, or think
Mm-hmm.
about, or modify my message around this vision. How do I bring, you know, this cohort along? How do I bring this younger cohort? Or, they all have
Mm-hmm.
different needs and wants, and developmentally are seeing the world differently, right? At the individual levels, that's really at the core, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's research that says that we're all going through these commonly shared patterns of understanding about the world, and so lifespan tries to illuminate those in a way so if you're going to develop leaders or you're going to develop yourself as a leader, you can actually be more effective,
Mm.
have more efficacy, because
Yes.
we don't want you to reinvent the wheel every single time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Life's just, so really fiery combined with some tools. So think of
Yes.
a
With some
tools
tools,
combined. Yeah, those tools are
with
really
some
important. Combined,
mentorship.
yes, mentorship combined with a pro-social value structure.
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. It's just like
That's a framework
equip,
for success right there.
right? Right. So yes, I will hand you the keys. If you are pro-social, you're equipped with some leadership
Yes.
fundamentals, and
Mm-hmm.
you got some fundamentals. Here you go. Here's the keys to the kingdom. Right.
Yes.
We can
Yes.
have that confidence, and you can have the confidence in me if
Mm-hmm.
those are things that I want to demonstrate and role model.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. You almost lost me a little bit when you just started talking about calculus, and I was like, oh, 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 but you got me back. I was like, I don't know about this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't want to do math.
Right, right, right.
But it
No,
makes sense. Those are the
yeah,
foundational,
yeah.
things that we need, and it does connect with that leadership component. And speaking of all of these really great, elements and frameworks and things that we need in order to see that future that we want to have, how do you reimagine education?
How do I reimagine education? So
Yeah.
to me, it's really providing those critical tools,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you got to have basic sounds to be able to speak, right? To be able
Mm-hmm.
to communicate. I don't want to bring up the calculus thing again and scare you.
Oh, please read the room.
Don't
Try to
worry,
make me
I wasn't
math.
that good at calculus either. But I respect it in the sense that it provides some fundamentals. So, quick story,
Yes.
and this ties to your question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, in having one of my children learn algebra, for example, him being able, he struggled with it, but he plowed through it and was able to get a good grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but afterwards, he's looking at certain things like interest rates,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he understands how to create his own formula for interest rates based on the class he took. It wasn't taught in his class, but there's
Mm-hmm.
those fundamentals as opposed to taking something off the shelf and
Gotcha.
using it. He understands where that comes from and what's the basis for it.
Yeah.
At the time he was going through it, he hated it.
Yeah. Makes
But
sense.
now, a year out, it's, oh, okay, yeah, this is what you do with this and this and that. I'm like, wow, okay, I had no idea.
Yes.
So knowing like those fundamentals. So to me, again, when it comes to lifespan leadership, it's understanding a vision. How a vision is
Mm-hmm.
formed, what goes into a vision, a successful vision, not just any vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understanding, the communication, the way, you know, um, uh, expertise is exercised across the lifespan.
Mm.
That's a part in my book as we look into adulthood as well, the role of expertise. Um, Coming out with those tools that are research based,
Mm-hmm.
incorporating them, and then providing those tools so people can really practice using the tools. Right. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a big part of that. Part of the learning experience is really to practice using those tools so you can be effective. So as you're going into the world or applying them
Mm-hmm.
on a daily basis, you're just getting better,
Yes.
right? Because the whole idea is to get you to a point where you are unconsciously practicing those ideas and not having to think about it.
Mm.
Just like when you first learn something, you ask a lot of questions, but there's a point
Yeah.
where you are so competent in something, now you can also teach it and share with others. So to me, a reimagined education would be those leadership tools
Yes.
across the curriculum. It would be expansion of that because, again, I might be the first word in terms of the coinage of lifespan leadership,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm certainly not the last, and I don't
Yes.
want to be the last. And somebody, uses that as a launching point to do something totally different and reimagine that. More
Mm-hmm.
power to you. So the tools, the systems themselves, our systems adapt, but sadly they don't adapt fast enough,
Yes.
right? But with lifespan leaders, it's almost hard not to adapt faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have individuals that are pushing that envelope to bring about the changes to impact their communities in a positive way. So I think the tools, the working with systems, understanding the systems, because so many times I think we're still very reactive. So it's really hard to look at the system, and that's really where the change needs to happen.
Yes.
Resources, getting individuals to participate in something that's clearly transparent, right? So
Yes.
they know where they can participate, where decisions are made, or how they can participate in that decision making themselves. So, and really, so the tools, understanding systems. The other part I would say is really just inculcating that passion of curiosity.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah, I think that's so important because I think curiosity, passion, imagination, um, those are what lead to new solutions, understanding or reconceptualizing problems that have been reconceptualized in a certain way. Um, so that curiosity and lots of it is really, going back to seeing very concrete situations. Like I think about my own curiosity, how I got to this path. It was seeing a very contrasted experience than my own and asking why. And like I'm trying to grapple with that, right? So what are some of those contrasting experiences that can really allow our future leader, current leaders, or individuals that don't see themselves as leaders to embrace and be part of that contrast in the way that allows them to take agency, right?
Yes, absolutely. That is a beautiful reimagining of education. And I want to thank you so much for joining me and sharing all these wonderful thoughts. Where can my audience find you if they're interested in the book? Where can they find the book?
So they can find the book at online. They can go to Barnes and Noble, Amazon, type in Javier Ayala Lifespan Leadership. I'm sure it will come up. And look forward to, I can provide my contact information if people want to talk more about the book. But yeah, I really have enjoyed connecting with Brittany. This was fun.
Thank you.
And look forward to connecting with you and seeing many of your other podcasts as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And appreciate you for joining me on this episode of Conscious Pathways. Again, I'll link everything in our show notes. So if you want to look for the book, if you want to connect with Dr. Ayala, that'll be all in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all of this amazing knowledge. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you so much. You too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.
Thank you for tuning into Conscious Pathways. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Conscious Pathways wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on all major podcasting platforms, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and even a couple of smaller ones as well. So if you want to watch the video version of this podcast, you can go follow me on YouTube, and all of that is linked below in my show notes. I would love it if you left a rating or review of the podcast. It really does help it to grow and to find more listeners just like you. And until next time, don't forget to navigate your conscious journey with courage and kindness. And I'll see you there for more transformative conversations in education. Bye!